Well, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Anne, for the opportunity to respond. Let me begin by saying that I believe we need radical change, but whether in fact the system is broken or not seems to me to be an open question. Recently, I had a look at some detail at the position we were in 1985, which was the worst year of the last time we got into a big mess. And my conclusion on doing that was that at that time the problems that we faced were greater, a little bit greater than they are now, but our capacity to deal with them were significantly less in 1985 than they are now. I think we have very significant advantages, not least the much better educational attainment of a much larger labour force compared to where we were in the 1980s. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the low tax model. That we have superficially, a superficial analysis will tell you that tax GDP ratio in Ireland is low, relatively low. But the idea or the jump that implies that means we have very poor or must have very poor public services, in my view, does not stand up to analysis. And there are a number of reasons for that, why I say that. First of all, we spend virtually nothing on defence compared to others. Our demography is different. 11% of people in Ireland are over 65. I'm heading rapidly that way myself. And compared to 16% in Germany. And that's a big driver of public expenditure. But perhaps most importantly is the way we finance our pensions is very different to most European countries. They usually finance them to the tax line and we don't. And that makes a big difference. So I'd be much more demanding of our public services. We should be getting very good public services for the tax we are paying. And if we're not, it's not that we're not spending enough money, it's we're not getting the effectiveness and the efficiency out of it. Looking at say, the example of the corporation tax rate is very low, but we have the widest corporation tax base in Europe, courtesy of Ray McSharry's reforms in the late 80s. And as a result, we raise more in corporation tax relatively than Finland, France and Germany, despite our low rate. Now, I do strongly agree with Mary that two of the central problems we have with our current system is poor accountability and poor implementation or low executive capacity. I think these are two central defects that we need to look at. We have low expertise in the executive arm in the civil service generally. The civil service model seems to me to be still very much informed by the Northcott-Trevelyan report of 1854. I said 1854. That's not I didn't mean 1954. It's 1854. But that said, if you get a good chap with a first-class honours in Greek from Cambridge and he's bright, he can do anything. The gifted amateur, and we still have very much in our executive, the gifted amateur syndrome. There is a low value on expertise. Experts have to be watched. And they do have to be watched, but not by gifted amateurs. We also have very poor accountability, and I think this is the central issue. With poor accountability, because the executive, the government, controls the Dáil. And if it doesn't control the Dáil, it stops being the government. So therefore, the Dáil cannot be terribly probing, or as probing as it should be, of executive action. And that's why I and John Roden, who was in the audience, in 1986 argued, having thought a lot about this, that the central reform we needed was a separation of powers model, because we needed to get greater expertise in government, that you could get your ministers anywhere, but they couldn't be in the Dáil. And and I still believe that. I'm still crazy after all these years. Now, and it was quite encouraging for me yesterday to, 30 seconds, I'll be there. Is Micheál Martin seemed to go along with that yesterday. Now, can we get real reform rather than cosmetic things like reducing the number of TDs? That just diminishes the pool of expertise from which you pick your ministers. I think the jury is out on that, and the pessimist in me says we may get cosmetic reform rather than the real and radical reform that we really need. Thank you very much.